Welcome to the Global Citizenship Education Interview Series, where we engage visionary thinkers and transformative educators in conversations that matter. Today, we are delighted to be joined by Dr. Anshul Gupta, the author of two best-selling books, The Spiritual Indian Corporate and The Corporate Spirituality Models, Measurement, Challenges, Ethics, and Answers. She's also the founder of the corporatespirituality.com, a firm that provides certifications, consultation, and executive coaching on workplace spirituality. Dr. Gupta is a TEDx speaker and a passionate champion of employee well-being at work. And today, we will discuss an important theme, corporate spirituality, its meaning, practice, and transformation. Dr. Gupta, welcome to the Global Citizenship Education Interview Series. It is a real pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you, Dr. Emiliano, and I'm really grateful for this platform and an opportunity to showcase the work we're trying to do and hope it makes a difference.
Definitely. I believe the theme of corporate spirituality is fundamental, particularly when it comes to education, developing well-being of future generations, and really employees in all contexts, whether it is higher education, schools, or big corporations. I decided to engage with you in this important conversation, and I want to ask you, before we even start, a brief question. Could you define corporate spirituality, workplace spirituality, because this is core in our conversation today?
Dr. Emiliano, when we're saying workplace spirituality or corporate spirituality, we are talking about 5 sub-dimensions. It's a measurable construct. And we are absolutely not talking about any religion, caste, creed, sect, or any defined form of spirituality. It's a measurable construct based on 5 sub-dimensions. That is finding meaning in life through work, having interconnectedness at work, your values and organizational values matching, having compassion at work, and acknowledging inner life. So these 5 sub-dimensions at the corporatespirituality.com, we have our own scales to measure it also at individual and organizational level. So workplace spirituality or corporate spirituality ideally is an interaction of individual and organizational spirituality. And it is something that has been around since 20-25 years in the research domain. So my contribution through my doctorate, through research, and now through the corporatespirituality.com and the two best-selling books have been to get it into a platform wherein people know that such a dimension of looking at workplace exists and has proven to give sustained competitive advantage for the organizations. And because it is measurable, it can be linked directly to the company's profitability and bottom line. So that's what's the crux of workplace spirituality or corporate spirituality is.
Okay, so this is very interesting. From an educational perspective, I want to ask you this question. How do you define corporate spirituality besides the definition that was quite clear, but in terms of its purposes in cultivating learners' leadership, particularly in today's workplace, where in many cases just value, skills, and much less a values-based approach to leadership? I'm interested in initiating this discussion with you, and I find it particularly important nowadays.
So if you ask me about the practicality of it, most organizations focus more on skills and the outcomes of it rather than on the values of it. But here at corporate spirituality, it's OD intervention. It's a organizational development. It's a cultural intervention. It has to start from the top. When the leadership team decides that yes, we have to imbibe corporate spirituality in our organization, these principles that we spoke of, the values that we spoke of, finding meaning in life through work, having interconnectedness, values matching, compassion, inner life acknowledgement, they become a part of the organizational fabric, right from the recruitment to the induction to performance management to the training and development, and even the exits are being assessed on these parameters. That is how you and there are champions at across levels. So that is how you imbibe it in the organizational fabric. But yes, the challenge here, like with all HR initiatives or value based initiatives, is how do you monetize it? How do you link it to profitability? This is exactly what we have done. We have made a reliable and valid scale to measure spirituality at work. In the Indian context, at least, it's the first commercialized scale. Globally, there have been many more. The first scale ever was given by Ashmis and Denton in 1999. So that has been the basis of most of the scales that have been derived later. There have been Mitrif also who has given a scale. So this is how we imbibe it in the organizational fabric. But before we go to the organizations, the future leaders come from the educational institutes. So we do a lot of sessions with colleges wherein we do workshops on values at work, on workplace spiritual. How do you have spiritual values at your work as future leaders so that when they join the leadership, their values are in place. Once you fix it there, very little work needs to be done at the organizational level. So
What are
that's
some of
how.
the most popular values based on your experiences when it comes to discussions with the future leaders, so the young students, but also teachers, educators? What are some of the two or three most popular values that you see emerging in your discussions and trainings?
The few most repetitively that we get that are really required in the organizational fabric through the interventions that we have are things like benevolence, generativity, humanism, justice, what do you say, mutuality, responsibility. So these are a few things which repetitively come, and we have a model also in the book which starts with corporate spirituality, its subdimensions, and then its positive implications for the employees, wherein it leads to an increase in job involvement, increase in citizenship behavior, decreased absenteeism, increase in engagement, then positive employer attitude. And then it leads to sustained competitive advantage for the organization. And why we say it's sustained is because it helps you engage the spirit, that's the soul of the person, which is the highest form of engagement that you can have. And that engages the uniqueness of the person. Like, I'm a different person, you are a different person. So that person is not available with the competitor. So that gives sustenance for the organization when fully that energy is honed. So when you engage the person holistically, that gives the organization profitability. So that is what we are speaking of.
Yeah, I wanted to tie this important theme you are bringing in with the concept of developing global citizens and global citizenship. Here we are on the Global Citizenship Education interview series, but I see that what you are discussing here, values of justice, compassion, creativity, corporate spirituality that emphasizes the whole person. I want to discuss with you this in relation to global citizenship, how you see the two concepts interconnected, if at all.
Global citizenship is how you see the world together and you connect yourself and your actions as an impact globally, not just to your home, not just to your society, not just to your country, but globally. So, what corporate spirituality does is, if we see how do we see people at work? So, every person in general spends more than 60% of their waking life at work. In the industrial era, they were considered an extension of machines. And then there came an era wherein they were considered as thinking beings, then as emotional beings. So, of late, we have been persuading that look at people as spiritual beings, as spirits. When the person is entering your workplace, it's the whole person entering the work. It just overlaps. So, if that acknowledgement can happen and the acknowledgement that the person coming in is bringing in all those energies together and how he or she functions at the workplace has an implication back to his or her home, society, and globally at large. A lot of chaos that we see happening in our society around us also comes from what is happening at our workplace. That bounces back. So, this back
Yeah.
and forth bouncing of energies that's happening, if that is integrated together, a lot of chaos around us can be settled down. That's how I see its relationship to the global citizenship dimensions that we are speaking of.
Absolutely. There is always a connection between the local and the global, an individual context and the collective context, based on what I heard from many colleagues in different countries, states. Oftentimes, you leave the workplace because you do not agree with the values of that workplace, or you don't feel valued in that workplace. Before I move on with question number three, I want to ask you a follow-up question on the needs of developing what you define as corporate spirituality and your predecessors and other scholars. What is the major need for developing this notion of corporate spirituality if we look at society as a whole and then projecting that into a single corporation, a university, a school?
So the problem statement that we started off, even when we started off doing research, is that the moment you're entering any workplace, you're finding that the psychological contract between the employer and the employee seems to be broken. The people are doing work with the checklist mentality. There is high amount of attrition happening. The employers are not able to retain the good employees. At the same time, we have ample amount of news of layoffs. There is a disparity in between what is required at the workplace and the kind of people who are there at the workplace. And we have a falling business empires every second day, even though they are doing everything correct by the rule book. What is the missing piece in the puzzle? That led us to getting into research and all the news that we hear. We have enough instances globally of having distress at work. How do we prevent all of this? If there is a problem, there has to be a solution. So I am an HR professional. That's my primary profession. So before coming into research, I worked with eminent companies for around 10 years. And I found that there's something lacking in the way we are seeing people at work. The history of human resource management started with personal management. Then it was human resource management. Then it became human resource development. Since 1999, there was the first book ever written named The Audit of Corporate America by Ashmus and Denton. It was so new that it took time for it to reach globally. To answer your question, when we started in our research, the research started with the problem statement that you enter any workplace. You see that the psychological contract between the employer and the employee is broken. People are doing work with checklist mentality. And we have falling business empires, high attrition. At the same time, there are high amount of layoffs happening. And the people who are there at workplace are actually showing very less citizenship behavior on all parameters. So I myself is an HR professional. So before coming to research domain, 10 years I worked across various companies in the HR domain. The need to find the missing piece of the puzzle, I have had that hunch that there is something missing in the way in which we are managing people at work, even though we are doing everything correct by the book. I've been doing meditation since past
Hmm.
18 years. That also led me into thinking, can we engage people at work the way they are engaged when they are meditating, praying? Can the engagement level be that honest and that level? When I started doing my literature review, I stumbled upon workplace spirituality. So it already existed. So something that I was seeking, it already existed in the research domain since past 20 years. It started with Ashmus and Denton's book, The Spiritual Audit of Corporate America. Since then, it has been very popular in the research domain. Like I was saying earlier, my contribution has been to get it into its practicality and to the people who are actually going to use it and benefit from it.
Yeah.
If you see workplace spirituality, like I was saying, it's about, it started with seeing people at work in the form of just hands and legs, which was personal management.
Mm.
And then came human resource management, then human resource development. So, spiritual HRM is something that corporate spirituality or workplace spirituality proposes in a very agnostic way. We do not tell you to do, even yoga or meditation at work. Absolutely no.
You
Work,
clarify that it is not attached to a
yes.
specific religion, and that makes it even more valuable because then people feel free to practice their own religion. We're talking about spirituality in terms of values, a values-based approach to a workplace. Just a straightforward question. What is missing, in your opinion, in the workplace nowadays? It seems there is a very high satisfaction towards the workplace itself. Of course, we can't generalize, but many people leave their jobs because they are not satisfied with the working conditions, the balance between their family and then the workplace, the conditions themselves, the way managers are managing or micromanaging, even worse. What is missing and what has to be restored in order to really offer a workplace that really satisfies individuals, makes them happy to be there?
The missing piece, even through all of these initiatives, is getting humanity back at workplace.
Human centered attitude is what, in your
Yes.
opinion, is missing. That's important because it also brings back the old discussions we are having today about being a global citizen with humanity at the center, embracing humanity and the values that you mentioned, for example, social justice, creativity, positive communication, and so on. Now, I believe it's very important for our audience to understand if you could offer an example or a couple of examples about how the notion of workplace spirituality or corporate spirituality has succeeded in restoring or even further developing this values based environment that would encourage individuals to be happy where they are.
So, from research, what we found, Emiliano, it's not that good practices don't exist.
Mm,
It's just that they are not being talked out enough. They are
mm,
not being standardized enough. We found an ample number of examples wherein companies were already doing it in bits and pieces and benefiting. One of the major examples we found was the Taj Group of Hotels, a prominent chain in India. There was this instance of an attack that happened in the hotel on 26/11, and a lot of tourists were stranded, and there was a lot of chaos happening. People who were taking care of the staff that was taking care of the people, they knew all the exits. They could have saved themselves, but they saved the guests' lives. An investigation happened. How could they uphold that even
yeah.
when it was a threat to their own lives? So they could
Mhm.
do that because of the investment the company had done in their lives,
I
not
see.
just their work lives, but even in the personal lives. So they were taken from the tier 2, tier 3 cities, they were groomed, and it's not just them, their families were also taken care of, and they had an agreement. If something happens to them, their next kin would be given an employment. They had that assurance also. And even at work, if there is some calamity that has happened in their personal lives, it will be taken care of with, if you give the relevant proofs. So it was end to end, and there was a generational employment also.
Yeah.
So there were a lot of initiatives being taken so that the person working gets off the personal troubles and focuses at work. And honestly, the company is taking care of the growth of not just the person, of the family also.
That's a very important part too, because oftentimes we focus on an individual, but there is all the background, right? The family and a life outside the working place itself. Now, we are heading toward the end of this very interesting conversation. There is one more question I want to ask you. But before that, I want to come back the principles, I believe the five principles that you mentioned at the beginning of our conversation. What are the five principles? If you can repeat them again, and then I want to ask a question.
The first one is finding meaning in life through work. So when you're going to work, are you going to work just for money, or it is something that is giving you meaning? So when you're getting up in the morning, you go to work just for money, or it is something that you want to really do in your life, that is finding
Yeah.
meaning in life through work. Then having interconnectedness at work. Are you able to connect to the ecosystem wherein you're operating? So every field, every profession has an ecosystem. Are you able to sustain over there? Are your
Yeah.
values and the organization values matching? So when you're joining an organization, the organization and you both need to study each other enough. It's about what the organization stands for and what you as an individual stands for. If there's a clash, then obviously your performance is not up to the mark. Compassion. Can you be compassionate with AI coming and a lot of technological advancements coming in? A lot of chaos is happening globally, which is inevitable. But can we be compassionate in this scenario? There are a lot of policy changes happening. Can all of these things be done compassionately?
Yeah.
Then acknowledging inner life. So it is about acknowledging the spirit, the whole person. It's not just the person who's coming at work. The person might have hobbies, other forms of creativity. Can you engage the entire person and not just the skills for which you are taking the person? Because those skills draws energies from these entire traits that the person has. So that's acknowledging inner life.
Okay, so a final section of this very interesting conversation we are having today is your future projects. How would you define a global citizenship education slash corporate spirituality in three keywords, and why the three keywords? Let's begin with your forthcoming project, future projects.
At corporatespirituality.com, we have three agendas. First is doing workshops and leadership training and consultancy for the corporates. Right now, we have clients in India. Then we have second target audiences as the students. That's the graduation, post graduation, even school students. So we have been doing a lot of sessions with them in forms of workshops and measuring their current levels and giving them the agenda. That's what, how do you define success? How do you plan your future life? So all those sessions that we're doing, that success is not just monetary, success is purpose, contribution, and
It
peace.
seems
That's
that today there is a strong tendency to value the financial part, but much less what you're discussing today, spirituality and values-based approaches to a workplace, which is, I believe, a great topic. Okay, wonderful. So now the challenging one, the challenging question, the three keywords. How would you define global citizenship education and the old discussion we're having on corporate spirituality or workplace spirituality in three keywords, and why the three keywords? You discussed a lot of values, including compassion. Some other guests also mentioned compassion is a very popular one. You also mentioned creativity, positivity, harmony too. So I'm curious to learn from you which of these very enriching and important values you would pick as the three keywords.
corporate spirituality or the global education agenda that we are having. Let's keep it simple.
Yeah,
So tricky words are actually, jargons are actually not really required. Things which are easy for people to understand. So, spirituality at work, if we see, or even the global education agenda that we have here, how I see it is like a second human nature. It is almost like common sense for people who are self aware. People who are aware of themselves and their surroundings, it is naturally their second nature. The need for all these initiatives arise because humanity in itself has become so rigid that the connect to the realities of life and the realities of self has been disassociated. So that is where the need arises. So the tricky word over here is only that connect, that restoration of connection to the self, others, and humanity at large. So at corporate spirituality, we always say, let's make workplace better and world a better place to work. So that is
excellent.
how we see global education and spirituality at work coming together and making a change in society at large globally. When these things become normalized, a lot of positivity spreads, and that is what the world needs today. There has been enough chaos, and we all have kids, we all have the next generation coming up, and it is somewhere down the line our responsibility of the kind of impact that we are doing in the world and the kind of world that we are making for them. That's what we would want to do with you and with others who are relentlessly working in making the world better.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Dr. Anshul Gupta. author of two best-selling books. So let's mention them again because they're very important in the field, the spiritual Indian corporate and the corporate spirituality.
Available on Amazon.com.
Available on Amazon, which makes them reachable. And we hope that they will inform a change for the better in the workplace. Today, we discussed workplace spirituality, corporate spirituality, its meaning, practice, and transformation. Thank you very much for joining the Global Citizenship Education Interview Series.